What's going on, guys? My name is V Crane, but you can call me Kyle. V Crane is the name that's on my fake ID. Today I want to talk to you guys a little bit about Skyrim. I'm pretty excited that I get to do this actually because I love talking about this game and it's one that I hold very close to my heart. I'd even go as far as to consider it one of my favorite games of all time. I've personally spent countless hours surveying the frozen lands of Skyrim and plan to spend many more. Well, today marks 10 years since its release and the game has certainly left a lasting impression on the world of RPGs. It's been so relevant over the last 10 years, and well, that's because it's been beaten into the ground. But, you know. And then from the ground it was beaten into, it grew like a f***ing oak tree. It's definitely one of the biggest games of all time, and there's a few good reasons for that. There's so much replayability in Skyrim. Even after all this time, it's still enjoyed by many. It's provided us with many amazing stories, environments, and characters. With the vast number of things you're able to do, it's very likely you'll experience something different each time. I thought it would be fun to take a trip down memory lane together and kind of relive some of the nostalgia that Skyrim has provided us throughout the years. One of the most nostalgic moments for me is the first time I entered the village of Riverwood. It was a refreshing change of pace after being thrown right into that 0 to 60 introduction. There is just so much to remember. The first time you traveled to Whiterun to warn the Jarl after the dragon attack in Helgen. The first time you get caught stealing cheese and have to bribe your way out with the guards.
You have committed crimes against Skyrim and her people.
Your first introduction to Serana and her edgy vampire family drama. Remember the first time you got lost in Blackreach looking for the Crimson Nirnroot? Well, me too, and it was painful. The goal of this video is to explore the persistent relevance of Skyrim and provide you with some insight on what I think are a few of the biggest strengths and weaknesses. If you've played it, maybe you'll find yourself in another 300-hour commitment. It creeps its way back into the very depths of your soul, consuming you from within, until you are nothing more than a lifeless husk of a person who will occasionally leave the dark, icy chill of their bedroom to go get pizza-flavored goldfish from the kitchen. And if you've never played it, maybe it'll even motivate you to try it out for yourself. So before we get started, I want to give you guys a rundown of the premise. You'll start out chained in the back of an Imperial cart being taken to Helgen. Turns out you're a bit of a lawbreaker and now you're up next on the chopping block. That's it. You're executed. Way to go, you win. Could you imagine? No, you survive your execution only because a dragon shows up before the axe comes down. Probably shouldn't have tried stealing that cheese, my dude. It takes the lives of like 6 people. Well, 7 if you count the guy that was executed before you. Yeah, there were lives lost at Helgen that day. Dragon attacks are a very serious thing.
With me, up the tower.
To get away from the dragon, we team up with Ralof and the Blue Man group. We completely Jon Snow our way through all of the Imperial soldiers hiding inside Helgen Keep.
For the watch.
After taking down the last of the Red Boys, Ralof and the player separate from the rest of the Smurfs. Hey, here's a fun fact for you. Did you know that if you hold a bear up to your ear, you'll hear what it sounds like to be attacked by a bear? We find our way out of the cave and make our way to the nearest town. We arrive in Riverwood, meeting up with Ralof's sister, who explains to us that the village is defenseless, and we need to inform Jarl Balgruuf the Cheese Grater. I mean, I really don't see why we had to warn them. Didn't they see it? It was broad daylight. Helgen really isn't that far from Whiterun. But that doesn't even matter now because we got sidetracked and we're immediately halted by a giant that slaps our shit right into the 6th dimension. The plotline dominoes into a rapid-fire story containing war, rebellion, betrayal, and political factions vying for power. You'll even discover an ancient artifact after talking your way into a magical college, which for some reason can only take 5 students at a time. I mean, I guess they had to cut their budget after they blew themselves up. All of this eventually culminates into a climactic battle to save Tamriel. Skyrim is a game that's absolutely worth remembering 10 years later. We have a lot to talk about today, and I'm very excited, so let's get started. So let's start off by highlighting some of the features in Skyrim that I believe contribute nicely to its replayability. Later we'll get into some of the features that I feel have room for improvement. This is really where we start getting into the meat and potatoes of the video. The iceberg of Skyrim is never ending and there's really a lot to unpack. Take this with a grain of salt as my experience might be entirely different than yours, and that's totally cool, man. First, let's talk about the world building, specifically the lore, quests, and the environment. In general, these are probably my favorite things about the Elder Scrolls series. Bethesda does a fantastic job narratively constructing the world of Tamriel. They kinda use the lore and the environment to their advantage, which essentially allows players to uncover the story as they explore. So in essence, the more you look around, the more you're able to piece together. This is provided through various quests, NPC interactions, and even textbooks found around various places in the game. Skyrim has such a rich cosmology established that's worth exploring and discovering for yourself. But if you'd rather have it all in one compendium, you could also just use the Skyrim wiki. It's all on there too. I've got a particular piece of lore I'd like to discuss with you guys that I think truly contributes to making Skyrim such a memorable game. Your introduction in Helgen gives you your first taste of the rising conflict that's taking place between the Stormcloaks and the Imperials. A lot of the lead up takes place before events in the game, however much of the information can be discovered just by playing through the storyline. The conflict was bred by the outcome of the Great War, so I think that it would be helpful to provide a bit of context as to what happened leading up to it. The war broke out on the 30th of Frostfall, which I guess is like a Tuesday. You know, it's a seemingly normal day, the frost is falling, simple Argonian, simple life. You make your way to the market to pick up some cheese and magicka potions. You get back only to find your house on fire because the war had broken out while you were gone. You lost your job because the shop in Rorikstead was pillaged too. Your wife decides to leave you and take the kids to stay with her mother in Riften for a while, but you know she isn't coming back. This was coming for a while now. Life in Skyrim is great. A massive war broke out between the factions of the Third Aldmeri Dominion Elves and the men in the Tamrielic Empire. Tensions definitely didn't just surface overnight, as the men and elves of Tamriel have a long and violent history together. Let's talk about some of the major players here. So the Empire was founded by Tiber Septim, who is also a guy named Talos, and he's a dragon god that's worshipped by men. We're not going to dig too deep into that iceberg, just know that they hold the main seat of power in Cyrodiil, and their influence has shifted over the course of time. Now, the Thalmor are the governmental body of the Aldmeri Dominion. They are an elven supremacist group that seek to bring together all of the provinces of Tamriel with a single government leadership where the elves would hold all of the power. The Aldmeri Dominion was established by the Thalmor in 4th Era 29 in an attempt to recreate the broken First Aldmeri Dominion. They endeavored to expand their empire at the current empire's expense. Similarly to the Thalmor, they believe elves are superior to all other races on Tamriel. The empire came under the rule of Titus Mede II after the death of his predecessor. He inherited an empire whose military was already weakened and scattered by previous wars. At the time, there were a total of 4 provinces within its control. However, there was a great deal of infighting within the province of Hammerfell. So I'm not really sure you can effectively govern a province experiencing a civil war. That's kind of like trying to stop 2 siblings from fighting over which one of them gets to play RuneScape on the living room computer after school. The Empire's other 3 provinces of Cyrodiil, High Rock, and Skyrim, however, were extremely prosperous. The prosperity didn't last very long because the Thalmor appeared outside of the Imperial City with a covered wagon containing a gift for the Emperor. They proposed an ultimatum, which were really just a list of demands. They wanted large tributes of gold, disbandment of the group known as the Blades, the outlaw of Talos worship, and lastly they required a significant portion of the province of Hammerfell. After his refusal to accept the terms, the elves revealed what was hidden in their wagon. It kinda ended up being a bunch of heads of already disbanded Blades. This pretty much started the Great War between the Aldmeri Dominion and the Tamrielic Empire. Gift giving definitely isn't an elven strong suit. Maybe next time they should try some scented candles from Bath & Body Works. Or maybe a decorative fruit basket. You know, I feel like they had options. To me, it sounds like the Dominion knew the Emperor would refuse and they used that to their advantage. They were successful in instigating a war. They overwhelmed and sacked the Imperial City, which caused the Emperor himself along with his forces to flee to the desert. A few years of merciless fighting passed, which finally culminated at the Battle of the Red Ring. It ended with the Imperials taking back the city from the Dominion army, although in a grand scale the victory itself was rather insignificant. This was because the Emperor knew that his legions were too weak to continue fighting in the war. Knowing that he and his armies didn't stand a chance after the previous battle, the White Gold Concordat was accepted by Emperor Titus Mede II and acted as a treaty, bringing an end to the bloodshed. However, the treaty's terms were literally just their demands from earlier, and this was sure to cause some unsettlement with some of the people. It's likely that the Emperor acted out of fear, and by signing the Concordat, large portions of southern Hammerfell were ceded to the Dominion. The Empire seemingly abandoned Hammerfell as an imperial province. Yeah, they completely Macaulay Culkin the Redguard people and left them home alone to fight against the Dominion. Hammerfell and the Dominion eventually came to a standstill, signing their own treaty, removing the Aldmeri Dominion forces from Hammerfell, and by abandoning the Redguards, they haven't trusted the Imperials since. After the White Gold Concordat was signed, the Emperor didn't really enforce the outlaw of Talos worship, but after a while the Thalmor caught on and demanded the Emperor uphold the outlaw, effectively making the 9 Divines the 8 Divines. There were many in Skyrim who revered Talos as a god and were not fans of the situation, so they decided to fight against the Thalmor and the Empire. Most notably, a Nord by the name of Ulfric Stormcloak rose to power by leading the rebellion after becoming the Jarl of Windhelm. We'll go more in depth with him a bit later in the video. For now, just make note that the Stormcloaks believe that the Imperial Empire is a failing puppet of the Thalmor and desire the freedom of Skyrim's people over anything. A civil war pretty much broke out in Skyrim after the events. This causes the Emperor to send the leader of the Imperial Legion, General Tullius, to Skyrim with a goal to quell the rapidly growing Stormcloak uprising. The world building through the environmental storytelling of Skyrim is totally unreal. This is just a sample of one of the hundreds of storylines you will experience. Guys, there are so many different quests, I could be here for days simply discussing them. So let's start a discussion here. What are some of your favorite quests in Skyrim? Let me know in the comments. Next up, we're going to talk about some of the characters. Most of the characters in Skyrim are actually pretty memorable for me, even the lackluster ones. Some of them truly contribute to making Skyrim worth replaying even after all this time. A lot of them are really well written and feel like characters you really grow with. Go out and befriend a few of them, and eventually they can follow you around as companions. They'll throw in a few lines of dialogue and carry all the things you can't be burdened with, like the crushing weight of the disappointment you've become. Okay, maybe they won't carry that, but they'll carry almost anything else you give them, especially all the cheese you steal. They're essentially a thievery mule. You're not going through Helgen again, and obviously you're not gonna stop stealing cheese, so someone's gotta go down, but it's not you. Listen, sometimes in Skyrim there needs to be compromise. The story presented is nothing without the characters. Skyrim introduces us to some pretty amazing ones. First, I want to tell you a little bit about one of the characters I think is fairly integral to the game itself, and then I want to briefly mention some of the other interesting characters you'll encounter. So let's take a few minutes and break down who I feel is one of the more well-written characters in Skyrim, none other than Papa Smurf himself, Ulfric Stormcloak. At an early age, he was chosen by the Greybeards to learn the Way of the Voice at High Hrothgar. He studied with them for about 10 years until the Great War broke out in 4th Era 171. Yeah, remember the Great War we were talking about earlier? Ulfric initially felt called to fight for the Imperial Legion, so he decided to leave. Soon after he joined the Imperial Legion, he found himself in captivity of the Aldmeri Dominion during their campaign for the Imperial City in Cyrodiil. While he was imprisoned, they brutally interrogated him. After a while, they learned that he was the son of the Jarl of Windhelm. They considered him essential to maintaining their influence in Skyrim. The Aldmeri Dominion and Thalmor had already captured the Imperial City, but the Thalmor just wanted to be dicks and break his spirits even more. They actually lied and told him that the information he had given led to its fall. During the main quest line, you find yourself at the Thalmor embassy with the goal of sneaking around to find out if the Thalmor know anything about the sudden return of the dragons. You stumble upon a nice little bit of info. The Thalmor dossier you find on Ulfric states that he was allowed to escape. At first glance, it seems as if the Thalmor simply pulled an uh-oh spaghettios on the whole situation and tried to cover it up. They were kinda just like, yeah, Craig over in accounting let him walk out. Meanwhile, their supervisor is panicked because now he's got to explain to his boss during the weekly board meeting how they just lost the one thing that would essentially win them the war. Nah, the Thalmor are way smarter than that, and they definitely plotted to use this man. They totally let him go, pretty much giving him the key. Realistically speaking, I don't think Ulfric at that point in his life was capable of facilitating a solo escape from the center of a shit show. Maybe assuming there just wasn't anybody else in the building to prevent him escaping, I suppose it's possible. You know, like the Thalmor unionize and start protesting for fair wages outside, and Ulfric kind of just dips during the chaos. You might be asking yourself something like, why would the Thalmor let go their most valuable asset? Well, it's easier for the Thalmor to win their conquest when two of the biggest players are divided by a civil war. Remember that their endgame is to establish a new central power with purely elven dominance. Either way, he escaped the clutches of the Thalmor and retreated, only to wind up back in prison for the Markarth Incident. I won't go into too much detail about this, but I do think it's important to take away one piece of information. He was promised the return of the worship of Talos if he assisted the new Jarl of Markarth with retaking the city from a group of hill tribes called the Reachmen. Long story short, they succeeded. They initially agreed to reinstating the worship of Talos, but later faced pressure from the Aldmeri Dominion to reinforce the White Gold Concordat. The Jarl of Markarth turned on Ulfric, having him and his men arrested and imprisoned. While he was imprisoned, his father, who was the current Jarl of Windhelm, had died. Ulfric had to smuggle his written eulogy out of prison. This was the birth of Ulfric's hatred towards the Empire and is considered to be the genesis of the Stormcloak Rebellion. And that's pretty much the entire backstory of the rising conflict between the Nords and Imperials in Skyrim. I'm not going to really go into detail with the events that take place in the game because I want you to make your own choices and experience that for yourself, as the outcome is ultimately up to you. The Skyrim Civil War is one of my favorite narratives in the game. The characters and their motivations make the story one of its centerpieces, which is placed pristinely on the Skyrim dinner table. Now I want to take a couple minutes to mention a few of the other characters that I think are the most interesting. I won't say much about how the story unfolds for each of these characters, as I would be here all day. I'm going to give you a short and sweet summary and let you experience their stories for yourself. Alright, first up is one of the fan favorites. In the DLC Dawnguard, the player is sent to Dim Hollow Cavern where they stumble across a vampire named Serana. Come to find out, she's been sealed away for around 1,000 years, and she's carrying one of the Elder Scrolls. Damn, more imprisonment? I guess Bethesda really has a kink. You know, that's cool, no kink shaming here, but you found her and guess what? She comes with drama. Here's the TLDR. She's pissy with mom because mom is pissy with dad. So mom locked her away in a sarcophagus because dad wants to use her blood so he never gets another sunburn. It all comes together in the end, and I think Serana has one of the more powerful stories in Skyrim. She has a lot of different dialogue options depending on her location in the game. A lot of them will help you learn more about her as you go through the Dawnguard storyline. She's a fairly well-written character in my opinion, and the vampire family drama is always fun to experience. Serana is a follower character that definitely makes the I probably won't shout you off High Hrothgar list. Up next on the honorable mentions list is the Daedric Prince of Fate, Knowledge, and Memory, Hermaeus Mora. He shares a close resemblance to what you'd expect to see in some of the Lovecraftian Cthulhu mythos. He often appears to the mortals of Tamriel as a massive void of tentacles. I know what you're thinking, This hulking hentai hell is regarded as neither good or evil and maintains an ever-changing realm in Oblivion called Apocrypha, which contains an endless amount of forbidden knowledge. I mean that literally because there are books as far as your eyes can see. It's kind of like a library, but only if that library is found in the Divine Comedy. His realm is overwhelmed with an all-consuming sea of toxic green liquid that will disintegrate any who are unfortunate enough to stumble within. As if it's not already bad enough, it also consists of giant tentacles that advertise free slaps to anyone who gets too close. Monstrous Daedric beings known as Seekers serve the prince as guardians of the realm, attacking anyone that somehow manages to infiltrate it seeking his understanding. You'll run into the cryptic Hermaeus Mora a couple times in your playthrough, and he delivers some pretty memorable lines in an absolutely terrifying voice. The Prince of Apocrypha is certainly one of the more chilling characters you'll run into, and to me that also makes him one of the more memorable.
Perhaps you will prove clever enough to uncover the secrets hidden here. If so, welcome.
The last character I want to talk to you about is one that has a pretty big connection to our previously mentioned one. During an ancient time where dragons ruled over mortals, there was a dragon priest named Mirak who lived on the island of Solstheim. He stumbled across one of Hermaeus Mora's forbidden black books, which ultimately led him into the servitude of the Prince of Knowledge. He was gifted with godlike power, including the ability to control the will of dragons. With this new power, he turned on the dragons, consuming their souls and growing even more powerful in the process. Ultimately, his rebellion failed, and he was imprisoned. Bethesda. There's a book you can find called The Guardian and the Traitor that details the events. It claims that after Mirak was defeated, he was transported to the realm of Hermaeus Mora, and he's kinda just been chilling there ever since. So the amazing characters paired with the world building of Skyrim really creates an immersive experience. The major characters each feel unique and developed. Paired with the right environment and game conditions, it's possible some will provide you with clever insights. This just adds to the depth and personality of the characters. I feel like we've carefully covered the characters, and now we can move on to one of the next strengths that I think Skyrim has. Tell me your favorite character in the comments, and who are some of the characters that you really don't like that much? Next up, we're going to talk about the overall fantasy. Skyrim offers the player many different styles in which they can experience the game. This is done through a neat little feature called the perk system. Although I must say I do feel like the vanilla perk system is a little bare bones, I do appreciate its simplicity and how relatively easy it is to learn. There's actually a player mod out there called Ordinator which allows you to expand upon the vanilla system, which improves it tenfold. But we're not going to really discuss mods quite yet, we'll get into that a little bit later. Just know that it exists for now, and I would highly recommend checking it out if you haven't. As the player levels their character, they will gain perk points. The perk system grants access to 18 unique skill lines where you are able to commit 1 perk point per level to any skill of your choosing. This essentially allows you to build specific character types suited to your playstyle. This definitely provides much more replayability as you can experience the game from an entirely different perspective each time. It gives you the incentive to experiment with all sorts of different combinations, some of which can have very nice synergies. I mean, you can build a stealth archer like everyone else that plays, a battle mage that conjures swords and blasts enemies with lightning, a warrior that absolutely bulldozes through enemies using battle axes and shouts, maybe even a paladin who smacks enemies around with a sword and shield, providing healing with restoration magic. It's also entirely possible to choose to ignore the giant doomsday clock flying around the sky to live a simple life as a merchant, a blacksmith, alchemist, or maybe even an enchanter, building your home in the woods and living off the land, only going into town to barter, maybe pay a visit to the giants, giant chickens, and probably the murders. I don't think they're connected, but it's Skyrim, so the possibilities are endless. There's essentially a build for any way people want to play. You really have a lot of options in this game, and I think that's one of its greatest feats. You can be who you want and how you want. It really makes Skyrim one of the ultimate class fantasies. I remember one of my first builds started out as a battle mage that was focused on one hand and destruction magic. I'd run around and smack the bad guys with lightning, get in close and take them out with my daggers. After a while, I started training my sneak skill, and that had given me a full-on lightning shinobi style character. Your character can really evolve over time, so it definitely doesn't hurt to experiment with various playstyles as you go. I really haven't played another game that has a leveling system comparable to Skyrim, so to me, it's very unique in that regard. Are there any other games out there that you think do it better? I'd love some recommendations. Also share with me some of the unique builds you've discovered. Leave your thoughts in the comments so we can start a discussion. Now this last section is going to be rather quick because it's the feature that I believe just brings everything together. Consider Skyrim the gift. My last 3 points are the wrapping paper, and my final point is the neat little bow that's added on top. And that neat little bow is the music. The soundtrack in Skyrim was composed by Jeremy Soule, and it does a fantastic job of setting up the way the game feels. The music has a really dark, adventurous, and hopeful vibe to me, which is also perfect for exploration, slaying dragons, getting lost in Blackreach again, battling vampires, werewolves, or even giant chickens. There's a track for every occasion. One of my favorites is called Secunda, and I think it perfectly captures the essence of the Elder Scrolls series. And who can forget the iconic Dovahkiin track that plays as you enter the game, or the music that plays when you're in combat, and not in combat too, I guess. The music really is the cherry on top of the Skyrim sundae. What are some of your favorite songs in the game? The game has a couple shortcomings, and they definitely have a massive effect on its replayability. Thankfully, it's not enough to render it unplayable, just enough that I tend to notice each time I play. For me, one of Skyrim's biggest drawbacks is its combat and magic system. Generally, you're able to hack and slash your way through enemies without much of a fight.
We're here to teach you a lesson. Never stood up.
Or if you're a magic user, you're able to blast your abilities from a range and chip away at the health bar while keeping a distance. GG, you win. The combat feels so lifeless and unresponsive. I would have liked to have seen more defensive playstyles with dodge abilities and parries included. Essentially, the only way you're able to prevent incoming damage is from buffs, armor, and leveling the block ability itself. Now, the block ability is one of the skills that I find myself leveling less frequently than the others. I guess the idea of using shields to prevent damage is something I personally find unappealing in most of my playthroughs. I'd rather dodge my opponents and take them out with parries or ripostes. Furthermore, I think it would have been cool implementing the ability to combine different combat styles in various ways. Let me explain what I mean by that. For example, leveling your ranged and destruction skill lines up to a certain point could unlock the talent to equip the destruction ability that conjures elemental arrows. You could pick one of the elements using your magic whilst having a bow equipped. You would be able to fire the arrows in different elements. Think how awesome it would feel to run into Bleak Falls Barrow and absolutely decimate your enemies using lightning arrows. They could have even gotten more technical with some of them. Leveling your one-hand and two-hand skills together could grant you a passive ability that allows you to dual-wield two-handed weapons. I mean, you'd probably never be able to sprint again, but hey, who really needs to sprint when you have two greatswords equipped? You'd spread terror through the hearts of men. You're a titan. The need to sprint is beneath you. Skyrim's combat is pretty boring to me and I want to have a more active role in it. What I don't want is to hack and slash like I'm playing RuneScape on my parents' desktop in 2007. I truly feel that improving the way players are involved in combat would have created such a huge difference. So another big problem with Skyrim is that it feels completely empty. I know, Frozen North, they probably all just froze to death, right? Maybe wandered too far into a giant encampment? They couldn't possibly have been taken out by Skyrim's Dark Brotherhood. I mean, it's definitely a fitting name as they're not actually too bright. Aside from the handful of memorable characters you encounter in storytelling areas, the rest of the world is missing life. Yeah, that's kind of weird to me. Skyrim is so populated, but where's the population? Realistically, a video game can only render a certain amount of things before it crashes, so technically I'm nitpicking. Look man, I want immersion. I want 7 billion people in Skyrim. I just want to help fix all of their problems so I can avoid fixing my own. I don't want to be able to tell the difference between a video game and reality.
Daddy, chill.
I'm not that unrealistic. Or sad. Or am I? I don't know, man. I wish I could talk to somebody about it, but like I said, Skyrim really doesn't offer me anybody to talk to outside of Nazim, but he never takes me seriously.
Make it quick.
Thank God for the amazing world building, because where is everybody in this game? Without mods that actually add more characters, it feels like I'm being homeschooled. You know, I know there are other kids out there, but I never get to see them because mom's got separation anxiety. Now, most cities, with the exception of Solitude, which is the most perfect city in Skyrim, have a few guards and maybe several other characters running around, and they're actually programmed to follow specific schedules. I always thought it was a nice touch by Bethesda, so I will give them that. Seeing the characters' consistency would be much more impactful if there were simply more meaningful ways to interact with them. Guys, I just slayed a dragon. What do you mean to tell me only 13 people showed up to the after party in Whiterun? I mean, 13 people showed up. What did you expect? That's everyone. Everyone else got caught in the crossfire of you and the guards because you can't stop stealing cheese, dude. Like, we get it, you're Dragonborn. But you're not only the Dragonborn, you're also the Master Thief, Magical Assassin, Goblin King. Which leads me directly into my biggest grievance with this game overall. Let me explain it like this. You ever see the show Dragon Ball Z? Who am I kidding? There are only two types of people in this world. People who have watched Dragon Ball Z and liars. Well, I feel like it suffers from one major drawback. For those of you that may not have seen it, the main character Goku is written with an unbelievable level of plot armor. Oh no, he can't beat Frieza. Guess what? Now he's a Super Saiyan. He struggles against Cell? Gohan, come here, boy. Well, that one isn't plot armor as much as it is just an unwise decision. I mean, he kind of just gave Cell a senzu bean and was like, here, go pressure wash my son. What I'm getting at here is nothing ever truly seems at stake in Dragon Ball Z. Because whatever happens, Goku is just gonna go Super Saiyan 12 and then take 8 episodes to win after preaching about friendship. Plus, they have 7 magical Dragon Balls that bring people back from the dead. It seems like they can afford to sacrifice their kids for the meme. I feel like Skyrim suffers from the same drawback. You start off as this stinky little guy that was caught stealing cheese and tried crossing the border illegally. Eventually you'll make your way to Whiterun and find out you're literally every dragon's stepfather. You casually prance about in Riften as the master thief of a guild you single-handedly rebuilt from the ground up. You become the master magician at the College for Mages and literally never go back there again. You're elected the leader of a cult of assassins after one of the top 10 stupidest anime betrayals of all time. And eventually you make yourself the leader of a clan of ice goblins that could possibly turn on you at any second. I take that back, I guess there is one thing at stake. Peace of mind. Guys, my point here is that in Skyrim, you're kind of like an omnipresent force wearing a plot armor thicker than middle school lunch ladies, and you carry a massive set of Dragon Balls, all 7 of them. It's almost like you're a being that exists as the singularity of creation. Everything in reality spawns from you. Everything exists as part of your dream. Nothing exists until you decide to dream once again. You are the creator, the one above all, the Genesis. So goes the cycle. Yeah, you're pretty much a god in Skyrim. I don't like that. You go from a stinky little guy to the god of everything in a matter of 30 hours. That's about it, really, and it definitely doesn't feel good. Alright guys, so before we end the video, there's one more thing I want to talk to you about. It's something that I think is very important to the game as a whole, and that is player mods. Skyrim really has it all when it comes to delivery. Like I said, it's a perfectly wrapped gift with a neat little red bow nestled safely under the Christmas tree, waiting to be unwrapped. However, when you unwrap it, there's 4 copies, all of which are for PS3. And then there's a little note from Todd Howard, written in red crayon that says, "Under construction, we need you." Because let's be honest here, Skyrim might have been made by Bethesda, but it was finished by the players. Some of the simple quality of life features seem to be missing for me. Mods drastically improve that. Mods can provide additional features and implement various fixes such as bugged script fixes, clunky NPC AI, the underwhelming perk system, graphical fixes, followers, player housing, environmental fixes, the magic system, additional weapons and armor. There's so much more. There are literally thousands of player mods out there, some of which are absolutely essential to any Skyrim playthrough, and that's where the issue lies for me. I feel like there shouldn't actually be an essential mod in the first place. Everything should work as initially intended, or the game just simply isn't finished. Now, of course, we all know that a game like Skyrim doesn't happen overnight. They are likely going to run into a few roadblocks. There will be time constraints and cut content. It always happens. Plus, all the DLC they have to consider if they have it planned. There are many different variables as to why it may feel a bit unpolished. But that's beside the point here. It could be argued that Bethesda gave us the bare bones of the game, knowing the modding community would take over. The modding community of Skyrim is so overwhelmingly talented, many go without compensation. Depending on how you feel about player mods, they could be seen as a beneficial addition, as well as Bethesda maximizing cost effectiveness and silently allowing the player base to finish their game. I mean, why would they need to worry about it being finished when they have the player base? Nah, I'm not that cynical though, and I personally believe that mods are a very welcome addition to the game. Bethesda might not be able to do it all, but they know how to give modders one hell of a start. Here's to hoping Elder Scrolls 6 will be completely polished before its release. We can hope, right? Skyrim created so many memories for me, as I'm sure it did for many other people. It's been 10 years already, and I seriously have a hard time believing that. It won me over fairly quickly because at the time, it was pretty much the benchmark for RPGs. Over the years, many other amazing games have come out, but I always find myself going back to play Bethesda's Skyrim. They really did a fantastic job building the foundation for the world of Tamriel, and the players did an interstellar job finishing what they had started. We've discussed the fantastic world building, the fantasy the game presents, the amazing characters you're introduced to, and not to mention the soundtrack, which like I said, just puts it all together for me. Although it has a couple drawbacks, the biggest one making you a literal god, it still maintained much of its replayability. There's such a charm to Skyrim, even after a decade. It will go down in history for me as one of the greatest games ever created. Well guys, that's all I have to say about Skyrim today. Thanks a lot for watching. If you enjoyed the video, make sure you leave a comment so we can start a discussion. Leave a like and subscribe. Also hit that little bell so you never miss an update from me. This has been V Crane and I'm signing off for now. I'll see you guys in the next one.